I've been hiking solo for about 5 years now. I'm pretty experienced with it and always do my research before heading out. This particular trail was in the Adirondacks, a 3-day loop that wasn't super popular but had good reviews online. I started the hike early Friday morning. The first day was pretty uneventful, just a solid 8 miles through dense forest. The trail was well marked, but I only passed two other hikers the entire day, both going the opposite direction. By late afternoon, I found a decent spot to set up camp near a stream. It was off the main trail a bit, tucked into the trees. I liked it because it felt private and the sound of the water was relaxing. I got my tent up and made some dinner on my camp stove. As the sun started going down, I noticed something across the stream. There was another campsite over there, maybe 200 feet from mine. I could see a tent through the trees, but I hadn't noticed anyone setting it up. Must have been there before I arrived. I didn't see any movement over there or a campfire, so I figured whoever it was had either gone to bed early or was out hiking still. I wasn't too concerned about it. I stayed up reading for a bit with my headlamp on, then crashed around 10 p.m. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night. I'm not sure what woke me, but when I checked my watch, it was 2:47 a.m. I laid there listening to the stream and trying to fall back asleep when I heard something that made me freeze. Footsteps, crunching through leaves and sticks, slow and deliberate. I held my breath and listened. The steps were circling my tent. Not fast, just walking around it in a slow loop. Around the back, along the side, past the front, then starting again. My heart was pounding. I didn't move. I just laid there listening to someone walk circles around my tent for what felt like forever but was probably only 2 or 3 minutes. Then T stopped. I waited in silence for probably 10 minutes before I finally worked up the nerve to look outside. I slowly unzipped my tent, just enough to peek out. Nothing. Just darkness and trees and the sound of the stream. I zipped it back up and didn't sleep the rest of the night. When morning came, I got out and looked around my campsite. I found footprints in the dirt near my tent. Boot prints, looked like a size 10 or 11. Definitely not mine. They circled my tent exactly like I'd heard. I looked across the stream at the other campsite. The tent was gone, completely packed up like no one had ever been there. I should have left right then, but it was 6 a.m., and I still had 2 full days of hiking ahead of me to complete the loop. Plus, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just another hiker who got turned around in the dark and didn't realize they were walking near my tent. Maybe they left early to get a head start on the trail. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I packed up and got back on the trail. The second day's hike was supposed to be about 10 miles with a decent amount of elevation gain. I made good time and tried to forget about the night before. Around noon, I stopped for lunch at a clearing with a nice view of the valley below. I was sitting on a rock eating a granola bar when I saw someone coming up the trail behind me. It was a man, probably in his 30s or 40s, wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled low. He had a small day pack on, which seemed weird for being this deep into a multi-day trail. He nodded at me as he got closer, but didn't say anything. Most hikers are friendly and at least say hello, but this guy just walked past me without a word. I watched him continue up the trail and disappear around a bend. Something about him made me uneasy, but I couldn't put my finger on what exactly. I finished my lunch and kept hickey. For the next few hours, I had this creepy feeling like someone was watching me. I kept looking over my shoulder, but never saw anyone. By late afternoon, I found a spot to camp for the night. This one was right on the trail since there weren't many options in this area. I set up my tent and gathered some wood for a small fire. As I was getting the fire started, I heard footsteps on the trail. I looked up and saw the same man from earlier walking toward my campsite. He stopped about 20 feet away. "Mind if I camp here too?" he asked. His voice was flat, no emotion. I really didn't want him there, but I also didn't know how to say no without seeming rude or paranoid. Yeah, I guess that's fine." He walked over to the other side of the clearing and dropped his pack. But he didn't set up a tent. He didn't even take anything out of his pack. He just sat down on a log and stared at the fire. We sat in silence for probably 15 minutes. It was the most uncomfortable I've ever felt. I tried to make small talk a few times, asking where he was from and how long he'd been hiking, but he gave one-word answers and wouldn't look at me. Finally, I said I was going to turn in for the night even though it was barely 7 p.m. I just wanted to get away from him. Sure, he said. I'll probably head out soon too. I got in my tent and zipped it up. I could see his silhouette through the tent fabric, still sitting by the fire. I laid there watching his shadow, waiting for him to leave. An hour passed. He didn't move. I must have dozed off at some point because when I woke up it was dark and the fire had died down to just embers. I looked toward where the man had been sitting. He was standing now, right next to my tent, just standing there, not moving. I stopped breathing. I couldn't see his face, just his outline against the faint glow of the embers. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity. Him standing there, me frozen inside my tent. Then he walked away. I heard his footsteps fade into the woods. I grabbed at my knife and stayed awake the rest of the night, knife in hand, jumping at every sound. As soon as there was enough light to see, I packed up faster than I've ever packed up anything in my life. I didn't care about making noise or being organized. I just shoved everything in my pack and got on the trail. I practically ran the last 6 miles back to the trailhead. I kept looking behind me the entire time, expecting to see him following me. When I finally got back to my car, I sat there for a few minutes trying to calm down. Then I noticed something on my windshield, a piece of paper tucked under the wiper blade. My hands were shaking as I got out and grabbed it. It was a torn piece of notebook paper with 3 words written on it in pencil. I'll see you. I got in my car and drove straight to the nearest police station. I told them everything. The footprints around my tent, the man following me, the note on my car. They took a report, but said there wasn't much they could do unless he'd actually threatened me or tried to hurt me. They said they'd increase patrols in the area. That was 6 months ago. I haven't been hiking since. I know I probably should have left that first night after hearing the footsteps, or at least I should have left when that man showed up at my campsite. But what really haunts me is thinking about what would have happened if I'd been a heavier sleeper that second night, if I hadn't woken up when he was standing outside my tent. What was he waiting for? I try not to think about it, but every time I close my eyes, I see that silhouette standing there in the dark, completely still, just watching me through the tent fabric. And I wonder if he's out there right now, doing the same thing to someone else. Last summer, I decided to go fishing at this lake I'd heard about from a coworker. It was pretty remote, about an hour-and-a-half drive from where I live, and supposedly not many people knew about it. My coworker said the fishing was incredible, and you could basically have the whole place to yourself. I left early on a Saturday morning, maybe around 5 a.m., so I could get there right at sunrise. The drive was mostly highway until the last 20 minutes when I turned onto this narrow dirt road that went deep into the forest. I didn't pass a single other car on that road. When I finally got to the lake, it was exactly how my coworker described it. Beautiful, quiet, and completely empty. There was a small gravel parking area that could fit maybe 4 or 5 cars, but mine was the only one there. I grabbed my gear and walked down to the shore. The lake was pretty big, surrounded by thick forest on all sides. I found a good spot on the north end where there were some rocks to sit on and started setting up my rod. The fishing was great. Within the first hour, I'd already caught 3 decent-sized bass. I was having such a good time that I didn't even notice how much time had passed. Around 10 a.m., I heard a car pull into the parking area behind me. I turned around and saw a white sedan parked next to my truck. A guy got out, probably in his 50s, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. He didn't have any fishing gear with him, which I thought was odd. He started walking toward the lake, but not toward me. He went in the opposite direction, heading to the south end. I watched him for a minute, and then went back to fishing. About 30 minutes later, I looked over in his direction and saw him just standing at the water's edge, staring out at the lake. He wasn't fishing or doing anything, just standing there with his hands in his pockets. I thought maybe he was just enjoying the view, or something. People do that. Another hour went by. I'd caught a few more fish and was thinking about taking a break to eat the sandwich I'd brought. I glanced over to where the man had been standing. He was closer now, maybe halfway between where he'd been and where I was, still just standing there, facing the water. That's when I started feeling uncomfortable. He'd moved closer, but I hadn't seen or heard him walking. He must have done it while I wasn't looking. I decided to pack up and move to a different spot. I walked along the shore to the east side of the lake, probably a quarter mile from where I'd been. I set up again and tried to shake off the weird feeling. I fished for maybe 20 minutes before I looked up and saw him again. He was standing on the shore in the same spot I'd just left, facing my direction. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a coincidence anymore. He was following me. I stood up and waved at him, trying to seem friendly. "Hey, you looking for a good fishing spot? There's plenty of room." He didn't wave back, didn't say anything, just stood there. I quickly packed up my stuff and started walking back toward the parking area. I'd had enough. I didn't care about the fishing anymore. I just wanted to leave. As I walked, I kept looking back over my shoulder. The man was walking too, staying about 100 yards behind me, not trying to catch up, just maintaining that distance. When I got to the parking area, I threw my gear in the back of my truck as fast as I could. I looked toward the lake and saw the man had stopped at the edge of the tree line, watching me. I got in my truck and started the engine. That's when I noticed something. His car was still there, but now there was something on my windshield. I got out and grabbed it. It was a Polaroid photo. The photo was of me, fishing, from that morning, taken from behind me, showing me sitting on the rocks with my rod in the water. He'd taken this photo of me without me knowing, hours ago, probably right when I first got there. I looked up and he was walking toward the parking area now, not fast, just a steady walk. I jumped back in my truck and drove out of there. I watched him in my rearview mirror the whole way down the dirt road until I lost sight of him. I drove straight home, my hands shaking the entire time. I kept checking my mirrors, paranoid that the white sedan was going to appear behind me. When I got home, I looked at the photo again. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. In the background of the photo, barely visible in the trees behind where I was sitting, there was a figure. Someone else had been there, watching me from the woods while he took the photo. There were two of them. I called the police and gave them the license plate number from the white sedan. They ran it and said it came back to a car that had been reported stolen 3 days earlier from a town 2 hours away. They searched the area around the lake but didn't find anyone. The car was found abandoned on a logging road about 10 miles from the lake. The officers told me they'd had a few reports over the past year of people feeling like they were being watched or followed at that lake and some other remote areas nearby, but they'd never caught anyone or been able to connect it to anything specific. They told me to be careful and to call if anything else happened. Nothing else has happened. It's been almost a year now. But I still have that photo. I've looked at it probably 100 times, trying to see more details about the figure in the trees, trying to see if I can make out a face. I can't. And that's what scares me the most. Not knowing who they were or what they wanted, not knowing if they're still out there, doing this to other people. I think about how isolated that lake was, how no one knew I was there except my coworker, how if something had happened to me, it might have been days or weeks before anyone found me. I haven't been back to that lake. I haven't been fishing anywhere remote since then, and whenever I'm out somewhere alone now, I can't help but look around and wonder if someone's watching me, if someone's taking photos of me that I don't know about. It's not a good way to live. I go camping alone pretty often. I know a lot of people think that's weird or unsafe, but honestly, I just like the peace and quiet. No drama, no having to coordinate with anyone. Just me and nature. This was back in early September. I'd found this spot about 2 hours outside the city that wasn't too popular. It had a small lake and some decent trails. I got there around 3 in the afternoon and found a clearing near the water to set up my tent. The weather was perfect. Warm but not too hot, with a nice breeze coming off the lake. I spent the first couple hours just setting up camp and walking around the area. There were a few other campers scattered around, but everyone was pretty spread out. I saw maybe 3 or 4 other tents from where I was. By the time the sun started going down, I had a nice fire going and was cooking some hot dogs on a stick. Real fancy stuff. I was just sitting there enjoying the quiet when I heard voices from across the lake. It sounded like a couple arguing. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but the woman's voice kept getting louder. I didn't think much of it. Couples fight, especially when camping. the stress of being outdoors and all that. After maybe 10 minutes, it stopped and everything went quiet again. I stayed up pretty late that night. I wasn't tired, and the stars were amazing out there. No light pollution at all. I probably didn't crawl into my tent until midnight. I woke up the next morning around 7. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. Usually in the morning, you hear birds and other campers starting to move around, but it was dead silent. I unzipped my tent and looked around. The campsite across from mine, the one closest to me, looked empty. Their tent was still there, but I didn't see anyone. I made some coffee on my camp stove and ate some granola bars for breakfast. As I was sitting there, I noticed something weird. There was a shoe lying on the ground near the shore of the lake. Just one shoe, a woman's sneaker. It was maybe 30 feet from my campsite. I walked over to look at it. It was wet, like it had been in the water. I looked around to see if anyone was nearby, but I didn't see anyone. I figured someone must have lost it while swimming or something. But then I saw another shoe further down the shore, also a woman's sneaker, and it was the matching one to the first shoe I found. That's when I started feeling like something was off. I walked back to my campsite and grabbed my phone. No service, which I knew would be the case out there. I thought about just packing up and leaving, but I felt stupid doing that over some shoes on the beach. Instead, I decided to walk over to that empty campsite I'd noticed earlier. Maybe whoever lost the shoes was staying there and I could return them. When I got closer, I could see the tent flap was open and swaying in the breeze. I called out a few times, but nobody answered. I walked up and looked inside. The tent was a mess. Sleeping bags thrown around, a lantern knocked over, someone's backpack ripped open with clothes spilling out. It looked like there had been some kind of struggle in there. Now I was really freaked out. I went back to my site and started packing up my stuff as fast as I could. I just wanted to get out of there and find somewhere with cell service to call someone. As I was taking down my tent, I heard a sound from the woods behind me. It was like branches snapping, like someone walking through the trees. I stopped and listened. The footsteps were slow and deliberate. Someone was definitely out there. "Hello?" I called out. The footsteps stopped. I waited for maybe 30 seconds, not moving. Then I heard them again, but this time they were moving away from me, going deeper into the woods. I finished packing, up in record time and practically ran back to my car. The whole walk back I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see someone following me. When I finally got back to an area with service, I called the police. I told them about the empty campsite and the shoes and everything. They said they'd send someone to check it out. I found out 2 days later from a news article. They found a woman's body in the lake. She'd been strangled and then dumped in the water. The woman was 28 years old, had been camping with her boyfriend. The boyfriend was arrested the next day. Apparently, they'd been fighting that night, which I'd heard, and things escalated. He killed her and then tried to make it look like she drowned. He'd spent the next morning trying to clean up evidence before he ran. The footsteps I heard in the woods, that was probably him. He must have been watching me, maybe worried I'd seen something, or would find the body. The police said if I hadn't reported the empty campsite when I did, it might have taken them a lot longer to find her. The boyfriend had already left the area, and they tracked him down based on the campsite registration. I haven't been camping alone since then. Every time I think about going, I just remember those shoes on the beach and that empty tent. And I think about how close I was to whoever killed her, how he was probably watching me pack up and leave. It makes me sick thinking about it. That poor woman was just trying to have a nice camping trip with her boyfriend, and I was sleeping in my tent not even 100 feet away while it was happening. I should have done something when I heard them fighting. Maybe if I'd gone over there or called someone, she'd still be alive, but I just assumed it was normal couple stuff and ignored it. That's what I have to live with now.